Well, winter is almost upon us, and it's brilliant to see and hear so many people planning on fishing right the way through the colder months of the year, and that's led to an influx of messages and comments on the videos about how we can change our tactics in order to try and continue catching through the colder months of the year. A few days ago I posted a question on the community tab on this channel just asking if anybody had got any winter related questions that might help you catch more fish and make you enjoy your fishing a little bit more this winter. And so the first 6 questions are what we're going to be covering tonight. These questions cover a range of tactics, baits and some other topics thrown in there as well, but they're all winter related. Now, first up was George Healy. Hey Jamie, we've all heard that in the colder months the fish are less active and eat less, and that's true. Fish swim around less during winter, and because they're swimming around less, they're not burning much energy, which means they don't have to eat to replace that energy. So that's exactly the kind of detail that we need to remember when we're thinking about what we're feeding during winter. So we scale the feed way back. Is the same true for terminal tackle, i.e. line and hook sizes? Are there any differences between commercial and natural venues in winter? Yes, you know, we often find that scaling the hook and the line diameter down will get you extra bites during winter. When I was growing up on the natural venues when I was a kid, that was the go-to, you know, the go-to change that we used to adopt. When if we weren't catching or we couldn't get bites, we would scale down and scale down and scale down. However, we've proven now, certainly with commercial waters and on some natural venues, that that isn't always as cut and dry as that. Sometimes scaling down doesn't really make a difference. For me, scaling the hook size down is usually done in relation to the bait that I'm using. So for example, if the bait that I'm using or I'm catching on is double dead red maggot, which can be a great bait at any time of year, but certainly in winter because it's less selective, it will catch you anything. If I'm catching on double dead red, I'll use a size 14 if I can get away with it. If not, I will go down to a 16. I wouldn't want to go below a 16 with that bait. However, if I'm catching on single dead red maggot, which is even less selective, which literally can catch you anything, then a single dead red maggot in the depths of winter when the water's freezing cold, then I will happily use a size 18. But I'll be absolutely honest with you, in the last 10 years I haven't gone below a size 18 hook. And as regards the actual comparisons between natural and commercial waters, what we generally see is that on commercial waters fish or the stocking levels are much higher than on natural venues. So that means that the fish have got to compete more, and that generally means that you're going to be getting more bites because the fish have got to compete for the food. However, on the flip side of that, on natural venues, because the stocking levels aren't as high, the fish don't have to compete as much, so you might find that scaling down will work better on natural venues. Next up is Aaron Smith. I would like to ask you about the method feeder. What changes do you make during the colder months? My approach does not differ that much summer or winter, but what edges can I introduce to make my feeder fishing more efficient? It's a great question, Aaron, and a very honest one as well. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the method feeder is that depending on how you fish it through summer, I mean, you've said that you fish it through the summer in a certain way and winter. Some people fish the method feeder through summer quite negative, so I could see why the same sort of approach might work during the colder months. But the 2 key issues for me, certainly as regards the method feeder through winter, are, well, 3 actually. We'll cover all 3. The first one is location. Sometimes in winter fish will ball up, certainly F1s and carp. They ball up, they group together. So that might mean that during summer months, for example, the fish are moving around a lot, swimming about, so they're a little bit more spread out. In winter, you might find location is key. So where in summer you might fish to a line clip and stick on that same spot all day and build up a bed of bait, that might not be the case in winter. Quite often in winter, you might have to go searching by putting your feeder in different areas to try and locate a ball of fish. So location is one. The second one is the amount of feed that you feed. So quite often with the method feeder in winter, we would cut back on the amount of feed that we're feeding. You might scale down to a smaller feeder, but you also might find that you want to feed less. So in summer you might be putting just micro pellets around your method feeder. In winter you can quite often catch more fish by using ground bait. So that could just be ground bait on its own with your hook bait in the middle of the feeder, or it could be a combination of ground bait and micro pellets. And by doing that, you're actually you're kind of watering down the actual amount of pellets that you're putting through by bulking it out with ground bait. So just have a think about that and scale the size of the feeder down as well. And the last one is, it's a very important one, but it's one that relies a lot on confidence, and that is the timings of your casts. Alright, so that's the third point. Just look at the timings of your cast. In summer you might be leaving your feeder out there 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes, depending on how quick you're catching. In winter, and this is no exaggeration, we can honestly be leaving a method feeder out there for up to an hour, depending on the venue that you're fishing, depending on the species that you're targeting. Be prepared to leave it in longer, and that's where your stopwatch comes in. You know, my biggest bit of advice on that is use a stopwatch. It's amazing how easy it is to lose track of time, or to think that your feeder's been out there a lot longer than it actually has, and that's where your stopwatch comes in. So they're the three key differences, Aaron, that we tweak to suit our winter approach. The next question is from Stephen Armstrong, a very loyal follower of this channel. Hiya Stephen, when method feeder fishing, how long would you wait between casts and when trying to locate the fish? Well, that's two different issues there, Stephen. One is how long you're actually waiting for the bite, and the other one is location. Just like we've just covered in the previous question, timings are experimental. There's no one answer, alright? And when it's really, really cold, depending on the venue that you fish in, I like to start on 10-minute casts, alright? So just get your feeder out there, set your stopwatch and give it 10 minutes. And I'd happily have 2 or 3 casts on a 10-minute cast. And the general rule for me is, and that is that if you haven't had a bite within 10 minutes, just step it up to 15 minutes, alright, and then leave it in 15 minutes for 2 or 3 casts, and if that doesn't work, leave it 20 minutes, and that is the general pattern. As regards location, if you haven't had a bite on any of those casts, then it's generally telling you that either A, the fish aren't feeding, which there's not a lot you can do about that, but it's also telling you that there aren't any fish moving around there. So if it's a venue like a commercial where there might be fish moving, or there's certain anglers catching, have a look at where they're casting. You know, are they casting into deeper water, shallower water? And if that's the case, if you're not getting any reactions, then you might need to start putting the feeder in different areas of the swim, because you might need to go locating fish. If that is the case, my best little bit of advice for that, this is not, you know, this is just a general rule, and that is if it's a smaller commercial, then if you're going to start searching for fish by putting the feeder in different areas, just put a slightly smaller feeder on. You know, because you don't want to put the biggest feeder on that you've got and be crashing it all over the swim looking for fish, because, you know, on some of these smaller commercials, if you're looking for fish, the last thing you really want to do is crash a great big feeder in amongst them, because, you know, that's either going to unsettle them, or worse still, it's just going to move them. So you might just end up just chasing the fish around your swim. So if you're going to go looking for fish on small to medium sized commercials, try it with a smaller feeder, just because it's a little bit more discreet. Next up is Mark Richmond. Hi Mark, I think it would be good to give some advice on clothing. Layering up correctly, many people pack up early because of it and are put off fishing through winter, and that's exactly true. You know, for me, fishing through winter, certainly through the depths of winter, it's something that I've always talked about on this channel, and that is that good clothing is not a luxury. If you're going to fish right the way through winter, you need good clothing, you know, and by good I don't mean expensive. It just needs to do the job, you know. It's a necessity, because, you know, if not, if you're going to be cold and uncomfortable, then you're not going to be enjoying your fishing. Even if you're catching fish, if you're not enjoying it, then, you know, there's something wrong. You know, you want to be enjoying your fishing, and you're not always going to be catching. You're going to have some really slow days depending on the venues that you go to, you know, and you at least want to make sure you're comfortable. One of the number one things for me as regards clothing is footwear. You know, it's really overlooked. I see people with expensive clothing on, even heated clothing, you know, but it's still on the bank, certainly on commercials, they're there and sat in trainers and things like that. You're not going to be comfortable. Look after your feet. So that could be just some, there are loads of different waterproof boots out there. There are thermal boots. You know, for the last 5-6 years I've used Ski-Tex, which are fantastic boots, thermal boots for that. But there are loads of different ones out there. So your feet are very important. They need to be warm and dry, and just get everything tucked in, you know, down the inside of the boots. That makes a massive difference. If you're going to go down the thermal route, just layer up. It's the number of layers that are going to help you out, okay? And, you know, one of the biggest things that I switched back to about 3 winters ago was the bib and brace style over trousers. I love just over trousers, they're brilliant, they're much more comfortable, but in winter you cannot beat the either a proper thermal suit or a bib and brace, and that's because it covers up the midriff here, it covers it up, there aren't any seams there, any gaps there, and it can make a massive difference. And the one that everybody talks about is your headgear, something on your head, whether it just be a cap or a woolly hat, that can make a massive difference to staying warm. And the final thing really, and it's probably aimed more at pleasure anglers, because I know there are lots of pleasure anglers that watch these videos, and that is just try and get comfortable. If you're going to pick a peg, you know, I see lots of people even in the depths of winter fishing with the wind in the face because they've caught with the wind in the face in summer. Quite often in winter you don't want to be in the wind, you want to be off the back of the wind, because that's where, you know, they're generally colder winds in winter, and that can make a massive difference in temperature to the actual peg that you're fishing. So if you can get somewhere out of the wind, somewhere comfortable, if you can get an umbrella in, that is going to keep you several degrees warmer, because, you know, when those cold winds are blowing, quite often, you know, it's more comfortable for us to be off the back of the wind, and that can be where the fish are as well. So quite often when you've got a wind hitting, you know, it could be a lake or a commercial, when the cold wind is hitting it, see if there are any areas where the wind isn't hitting it, and quite often that is where you'll find the fish. The next question was from Denny B. When you use leam, and how much in winter ground bait for roach and skimmers? Basically, yes, we do, or we quite often use leam during winter. Now, I can obviously do a more detailed video on leam if anybody would like to see that, but basically leam, we use leam, which is a clay. We add that to our ground bait to cut down the feed value. That's one of the reasons why we use leam. You know, it's kind of watering your ground bait down, and it's still putting some sort of an attraction into your swim, but because it's clay, it's not feeding the fish, and that's why leam can be great during winter. As a general rule, we split it 50-50. That is a general guide. So you would have half of your mixed leam and half of your mixed ground bait. But a lot of that depends on your ground bait as well. There are some fantastic winter ground baits out there where sometimes you don't really need leam because there's such low feed within the ground bait itself. Some are really super fine, so there isn't much feed in there. So quite often we don't use leam where we might have used leam years ago, but that's because the quality of the ground bait mixes are so good now. But as a general guide, it's 50-50. However, you might find that, you know, one of the guides that we generally go by is that the harder it's going to be, we increase the percentage of the leam. So if we know it's going to be super hard, you know, then you might want an almost 100% leam mix. Sometimes we can catch with just leam. All right, and if you're going to go down the leam route, don't forget there are different colours out there. You know, most people will be familiar with the grey leams, but there are dark leams. There are literally black leam that you can get, so that might be more suited to the mix and the scenario that you're faced with. So generally it's 50-50, but when it's going really hard, we just increase the percentage of the leam and cut down actually on the ground bait. And the final question is from Richard Webb. What depth of water would you be looking for when targeting carp on the method in the colder months, and would you still target margins and islands at some point during the day? Brilliant question, Richard. You know, location we've already discussed, but it can be so important. It's important all year round, but certainly, you know, certainly in winter. So if you're fishing lakes that have fluctuations in depth, then, you know, you probably expect, and you know, the better areas are going to be the deeper areas. That generally is the rule. So we can't talk about a specific depth that we're looking for because every lake is different. Some lakes are only 4 feet deep, so you know, you can't go looking for 6 feet of water if the lake's only 4 feet deep. So it's more about the actual percentage or the actual variations in depth that you're faced with. So whatever peg you've got, generally we target, you know, at some stage in winter we target the deepest water. That might be a great starting point, and then take it from there. However, we know now, you know, it's quite common knowledge now that we know that fish don't live in that deep water. So even in winter it's quite common for us to find fish actually located at half depth, depending on the depth of the venue that you're fishing with. So don't rule that out. So as a general rule, you know, if you're putting 2 lines in, whether this be up against an island or you're targeting margins, what we like to do is generally we'll have a line in the deepest part of the swim. So wherever that might be, whatever depth that might be, have a line there in the deepest water. And then what I like to do, if you've got the option, and if you're a little bit unsure about, you know, the fish location, just find half that depth. So if you're fishing a peg where your deepest spot is say 10 feet deep, then what I would normally do is find where there's 5 foot deep or 5 feet of water and put another line there. That way you're covering 2 different depths, okay, just to cover your bases. Are you with me? So the only downside with that is that if that 5 feet of water is really close to the bank or really close to where you're actually sat, you know, if it's clear water, then it might not be quite as clear as that, okay. So I wouldn't want to fish in 5 feet of water if it's right in front of me and it's jinkly and you can almost see the bottom. So you might have to adjust it slightly, but it's more about covering your options. And as regards margins, if you've got a deep margin and it isn't jink clear, then yes, I mean, I fished Winter League matches 8 years ago when I was doing more pole fishing. I won a Winter League on a commercial venue, and I literally won that league through catching the odd bonus fish down the margin, even through the ice. You know, there was certainly 2 matches where I literally broke the ice down the margin. It was only 3 feet deep, but by targeting that area at the right time of the day, which was literally the last 30 minutes, just as the light started fading, the fish still came into that depth. And I only caught 1 or 2 fish, but they were the only 1 or 2 bonus fish caught in that particular scenario. So if you've got room to target a margin, you've got a nice bit of depth, it's nice and quiet, and it's not too close to you, then yes, I'd always tackle a margin even in the depths at winter, even if it's only in the last 30 minutes. There are bound to be more spin-off questions from the ones that we've covered tonight, so if you have got any other winter related questions that might help out other anglers and you, then please pop them below and I'll cover them in a future Q&A video. This has been a month really where we've just covered lots of fishing basics, but it's great to see so many people preparing to fish right the way through winter. So I really hope these tips have helped you out. I hope they're going to help you catch a few more fish and enjoy your fishing more through this coming winter. So thanks for watching. If you found it useful, please give it a thumbs up and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.